Howdy, y'all. Stephanie here, live from the home office tonight to give you an update on some exciting news that we received from the North Carolina Building Code and the North Carolina Fire Marshal's office today. We officially have an owner affidavit for temporary housing buildings provided to those in need for use as a temporary shelter during the recovery from Hurricane Helene. So I'm very excited about that. What this is an affidavit that the owner of a property must sign if they're going to have a temporary structure. So it's just a very simple 2-page document. It does need to be notarized, and you do have to fill out some information. So it only asks one question or two. You have to pick one or the other. So the two options we have to choose from. The first one is the temporary housing building for use as temporary shelters identified above do not contain any electrical systems requiring the supply of electric current. So that is not going to have any wiring in it. The other option is the temporary housing buildings for use as a temporary shelter identified above do contain electrical systems requiring the supply of electric current, and that a licensed electrical contractor has certified that the electrical systems were installed pursuant to the applicable North Carolina Electrical Code. Then in bold it says, I shall request inspection of these electrical systems prior to energizing said temporary housing building. So you fill that out, and then you also have to fill out the address of the real property where the temporary housing buildings for use as temporary shelter will be constructed, and the parcel ID or latitude and longitude of the property, and the number of temporary houses to be constructed. The owner of the property signs this. It has to be notarized, so you'll want to do that. You'll sign it in front of a notary, and you can find a notary at any local bank. All your banks have a notary on staff. So I have already printed off a ton of these for y'all. So if you already have a temporary structure on your property and you need a copy of this, I'll have some for you. But also, I will post it in the comments so that you can print it off yourself. So we'll just go through and highlight just a couple things so y'all kind of have an idea. There are a lot of rules, 5 pages of guidelines, which I think is great. I mean, rules are great. Folks are going to live in these, even if it's temporary. This stuff matters, okay? So just real quick, we'll go through the temporary housing building during Hurricane Helene's state of emergency. Temporary housing buildings provided to those in need for use as a temporary shelter during the recovery from Hurricane Helene do not contain electrical systems requiring the supply of electric current, are exempt from permits and inspections from the local inspections department having jurisdiction for the duration of the state of emergency. The owner shall sign an affidavit attesting that the temporary housing building shall be constructed per the requirements provided to this in this rule. The affidavit shall be provided to the local inspections department within a reasonable time of its notarization. The affidavit limits the occupancy and use of temporary housing buildings to use as a temporary shelter for 180 days from the first day of occupancy. The owner assumes all liability associated with the construction and use of temporary housing buildings as a means of temporary shelter. Once the temporary shelter period of 180 days has expired, the temporary housing building shall cease use as a temporary shelter, and any reuse of the building is subject to permits and inspections by the local inspection department having jurisdictions and the requirements of North Carolina State Building Code. An affidavit for temporary housing buildings may be renewed by the owner at the discretion of the local inspections department by the completion and submission by the owner of a new affidavit to the local inspection department, provided that the state of emergency and this rule remain in effect on the date such renewal is sought. So yeah, we're going to definitely have renewals because we'll be in a state of emergency for a while here. So just a couple of more things it says. The location of the temporary housing buildings shall comply with local zoning laws. A temporary housing building is limited to 1 story above grade plane and a maximum of 400 square feet with a pitched roof. That's pretty good size. I like a 20 by 20. Temporary housing buildings shall be located to avoid areas prone to flooding, landslides, steep slopes, or other natural hazards. Essential services such as water and sanitation shall be provided on the owner's property. Not less than 10 feet minimum fire separation distance shall be provided between temporary housing buildings and property lines. If partition walls are provided within the temporary housing building, a minimum of 1 window on an exterior wall in each space that is used as a sleeping room is required to be used as emergency escape. Then there's rules on natural ventilation, heating facilities, minimum ceiling height, a minimum of 1 side hinge egress door, 1 battery-powered smoke alarm and or carbon monoxide alarm. Actually, you have to have both. You gotta have them together, or 1 each, but both of them. A site address and the number of temporary housing units located at the site address shall be provided to the fire code official to facilitate an emergency response. There's rules on the foundation, rules on the allowable joint spans. You got lateral restraints that supports. You got the subfloor, wall framing, header spans, top plates, bottom plates, wall sheathing, interior sheathing, braced wall, roof framing details, ceiling joists and rafter connection rules. We've got rafters, allowable ceiling joist spans, roof sheathing, building thermal envelope insulation is not required, but recommended. We've got rules on heating appliances. If the temporary housing building incorporates an electrical system, the owner shall request that the system be inspected by the appropriate electrical inspector prior to being energized, and that a licensed electrical contractor has certified that the electrical systems were installed pursuant to this rule and the applicable North Carolina Electrical Code. Temporary housing buildings shall be considered detached accessory buildings for applying for the requirements for the North Carolina Electrical Code. The provisions of this rule only apply to temporary housing buildings located in the 25 counties of North Carolina that were declared a major disaster by the President of the United States. I'm glad he declared something. All right, y'all. So we can have temporary housing. We can have tiny houses up to 400 square feet. The main thing that's going to matter is if you decide to run electrical in it or not. A lot of good information here. We just touched the highlights on it because I didn't want to talk forever. But I will have copies of these for you at the warehouse. If you need one, come see me. This is good. This is good. I like it. We've got to get folks warm. We've got to get them in some housing. I don't want this to, I don't want anybody, if we build these, say if you build them at $20,000 each, 5 to 7 of those could pay for a new house. They could build a new house. So let's make sure folks are staying warm, but let's also stay steady focused on getting folks home. Let's build houses. It's going to be of the most importance. So thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate y'all. I love y'all, and I'll see you later.